everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. All right, so we've been talking about the Bill of Rights. We've been talking about, the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. Yesterday we talked about how the Bill of Rights got added. We've actually mentioned that a couple times so far. And then we went through the first, second, third, fourth amendment yesterday. The first and second amendment are probably the most famous that people know of. First amendment being the freedom of expression. The second amendment being the right to bear arms. Today we're going to start talking about the other amendments that's in the Bill of Rights. Amendments 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. These are lesser known, but they're very important. And just like we talked about yesterday, the order in which they go is pretty much the importance that the Founding Fathers viewed them as. So it doesn't mean that the Quartering Act to make sure you didn't have to house troops doesn't really apply very much in our lives today, even though it is one of the top amendments in the Constitution. It just shows that at the time that was the main concern ranked wise of the Founding Fathers. So we're going to start talking about some of these other ones today, and they're all really cool, and it really gives you an insight into the mindset of the Founding Fathers as they are creating this new document. Amendments 5, 6, 7, and 8. So let's go through each one of these, okay? The Fifth Amendment, all right? It's the fifth one in the Bill of Rights. Teacher joke. All right, so the Fifth Amendment, and it reads, "No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment of indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger." And you're like, Mr. Wagstaff, I lost you after "no person shall." What in the world does this mean? So let me help clarify, because the Fifth Amendment is incredibly important, all right? It is still used all the time in law today. Not only is it incredibly important, I'm going to talk about why this was added into the Bill of Rights. But first, let me explain to it. So this is more of a straightforward way of what this means. Part of the Bill of Rights, which is the Fifth Amendment, which are also the first 10 amendments of the United States Constitution. Y'all know this. The Fifth Amendment has to do with issues with the federal level, which pretty much most of these do. It insists that the government must bear the burden of proof, and defendants have no reason to help the government prove its case. You're like, okay, still a little lost, Mr. Wagstaff. Completely fine, all right? So the Fifth Amendment, all right? If you've ever seen court shows or anything, and somebody's on the stand, they're like, "I plead the Fifth." This is what they're talking about. It's the Fifth Amendment. So in America, America takes this idea that you are innocent until proven guilty. This is actually a pretty cutting edge idea, all right? So everybody's going to be assumed they are innocent until they can be proved they are guilty of something. So you can't go throw everybody in prison, all right? Jail and prison are different. You can't go throw everybody in prison, while you decide whether they're innocent or not. That was happening in other countries. That would happen in England. They could put you in jail for years and years and years, put you in prison while they try to figure out if you're guilty or not. You're presumed guilty until innocent by default. They never really used that terminology, but that was how it played out. So in America, they're going to try to do it differently. We use the term "you're innocent till proven guilty." Now, does that mean you could be guilty, and if they can't prove you're guilty, that you get off scot-free? Absolutely. Does that happen? Absolutely. Do people get off from a crime everybody in the world knows that they did it, but they can't prove it? Yes. We are designed that way for that to happen, because with the freedom that we want and without the government oversight, we make the conscious decision. We would rather let guilty people go every now and then than every now and then put an innocent person in prison. Now, the fact that that still happens, and we'll talk more about court cases and stuff as we move further on in this course, it is a rare situation typically, because you are innocent till they can prove you're guilty. right, in a court of law. So, Mr. Wagstaff, how does that apply to the Fifth Amendment? So, on top of this whole, you're innocent till proven guilty, and so all the benefits go to the person who's being accused of a crime, all right? So, if you committed a crime and the government is trying to get you in trouble for it and put you in jail for committing a crime, the responsibility to prove that you did something wrong is the government's responsibility, not yours. Meaning, you don't have to help the government at all. At all. Now, I mean, they're still going to make you show up for court and stuff like that so that you're there. But you are not required to help out the government. If the government puts you on stand, because perjury, lying under oath, you can go to jail for that. So if they put you on the stand, like, you kill this guy, or if it's that bad, then it kind of loses the, you're on the side of this person. Like, I was good with him when it was parking tickets. Now you're talking about this guy might have murdered somebody. Just go, you committed this crime. The government can't put you on the stand and ask you that question and force you to answer. Because if you say you did it and you said, yes, I did it, boom, you confessed, you're going to jail. If you say, no, I didn't do it, then they prove that you did it. Not only are you in trouble for the crime, you're now in trouble for lying under oath. All right? Because of that, they put in the Fifth Amendment. You ain't got to say nothing. And that's where it is, I plead the Fifth. You do not have to incriminate yourself. If you don't want to talk about it, you ain't got to talk about it. You broke a rule, all right? Y'all's responsibility to convict that jury, which we'll talk about that. You go convince that jury over there that I did it. But you ain't going to force me to talk about it. And this is why a lot of times in trials, you never see the person who's on trial take the stand. It's rare for that to happen. And the Fifth Amendment allows for that. So whenever you see these court, I plead the Fifth, they don't want to talk about it because it can't really benefit them. If they can't prove that you did it, you're innocent. So the Founding Fathers wanted to make sure this was in here because they were really concerned about what had been happening in England, where people just get put in jail as they tried to find enough information to prove they were guilty, whether they were or not. So the Fifth Amendment basically says you don't have to incriminate yourself. It also does another random thing here. It eliminates double jeopardy. What that means is, say you get put on trial. I'll give you a famous one from the 1990s. All right. O.J. Simpson, all right, was accused of murdering his wife and his ex-wife and her, we'll say boyfriend. Anyway, he was accused of murdering them. There is a ton of evidence that looked like he did it. It's pretty, my opinion, it clearly looks like he did it. It's all this, his blood's at the scene, all this stuff. It's cut and dried. But because when they were picking up the evidence, a bunch of crazy stuff happened. That evidence wasn't allowed to be used in court. So the jury never saw any of this evidence. So all they could base there is he guilty or innocent based on the evidence that they were given, which wasn't exact. So they said not guilty. And everybody's furious, this guy clearly killed these two people and he got off. Well, even if they can come back and verifiably prove that he did kill them, they can never put him on trial as a criminal for this murder again, because he's already been tried one time and found not guilty. It's double jeopardy in the Fifth Amendment. If they put you on trial and you're found not guilty, or if you're found guilty, you can't do it again. You can't be put on trial again for the same crime. This way they can't, keep trying you over and over and over until they get a guilty verdict. So that is a part of our Constitution. There's a movie called Double Jeopardy with Jennifer Lopez back in the day. And the movie is that her husband fakes his death and makes it look like that she killed him. And so she is convicted and goes to jail for this. And then when she gets out of prison for murder, she finds out he's still alive. And I haven't seen that. I know what the plot of it is. I guess she goes to kill him, and he can't do anything about it because since she's already been convicted of his murder, she can't be convicted again. It's not necessarily, I doubt that would hold up in the real world. But the movie's called Double Jeopardy, and that's what it's based off of. But Fifth Amendment, you do not have to incriminate yourself. The Sixth Amendment And this kind of goes along with what we've been talking about with the judicial concept, which is most of what these amendments deal with, is how you get people in trouble, all right? How you punish people. The Sixth Amendment says, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation. So again, this one's a little easier to read. You may have picked up on that here. Here's what the Sixth Amendment says. Oh, that's kind of blurry there. Might be. When you are arrested for a crime, all right, like within 24 hours, you're going to be brought in front of a judge, and they're going to tell you what you're being charged with, like formally. Because what would happen in England is they arrested you, they could just put you in jail for like forever until they decided to tell you what you're in jail for. And the government could very easily do this to, put people that were political adversaries in jail. Corrupt governments around the world very often use the judicial branch, the courts, to silence people that don't like the government. That is why all this stuff is in the Bill of Rights, to prevent that from happening. So if you get in trouble for something, a speedy trial, like they have to tell you what you're on trial for, and they give you a court date. Now, sometimes if you can't make bail, and we'll talk about that in later stuff, if you can't make bail, you may stay in jail for a month until your trial. But that's as fast as they can. They're not like wasting time. There's just a lot of cases ahead of you. So that's what a speedy trial means. You're not going to be in jail for years and years waiting on this trial, in theory. An impartial jury. The people who decide you're guilty or innocent are people just like you. And that's what the Sixth Amendment talks about with the impartial jury. That your peers, 12 people, will decide whether you're guilty or innocent of the crime you're convicted of. And we'll talk about situations in which that gets manipulated throughout history. But this is within the Constitution. You also have the right to confront anybody that accuses you of anything, like Billy stole my goats. And if you're Billy, you can go be like, 100% I didn't steal your goats. I don't even know who you are. I live in a different state. What are you talking about? Like, you have the right to confront whoever's accusing you of stuff. This is something to, there'd be like anonymous, like, oh, and this anonymous person said this or that. That is, something I want to make sure they got put into our Constitution. Also, you have the right to effective assistance of counsel, which is a unique, cool stories to go along with that too. You're allowed to hire a lawyer. Lawyers just represent you, all right? You pay them money, they're good talkers, and they can take care of stuff for you. So you have a right to a lawyer. That is in the Constitution. So the question here is, what would happen if the government wasn't required to provide a speedy and fair trial? How could the government keep innocent people in jail? So we had talked about this. What had England done in the past that we want to make sure to avoid that we thought was super shady and want to make sure that didn't happen in America? So pause this, all right, answer these, and then unpause me and we'll roll on. All right, the Seventh Amendment. Ooh, stepping on things. Seventh Amendment. The Seventh Amendment, as we on Fifth, Sixth, and Seventh. Again, another court one. In suits at common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of common law. What? Maybe the only thing that you saw there was $20. All right, because that is literally in the amendment. It literally says $20 in the amendment, which nobody really mentions that very often. And I think it's crazy because when this is written in the 1780s, $20 is a lot of money. You'd probably, $300, $400. It's not an exact, trajectory of how much money is worth because you didn't use money for everything back then as you do today. So that's a whole economics thing. But so $20, which today doesn't seem that much. Basically this means if you sue somebody, all right, if you sue somebody, you have a right, instead of just a judge deciding who is right and wrong, you can have a jury. You can ask for a jury. As long as you're suing them for more than $20. So if you're suing them for a chicken back in the 1700s and it costs $1, no, the judge is going to be like, yes, you owe them a chicken, or no, you don't, whatever. All right. If it's over $20, you then have the right to ask for a jury. It's not by default jury. All right. You can ask for a jury. It is common for suits to, there's just a couple $1,000. You see it like the People's Court and stuff like that. People sign away their rights for a jury in order to have a quick resolution to it with just a judge that makes a decision. You have the right, if you're suing somebody, like not a criminal thing, like I paid this guy, 15, or let's do more than $20. I paid him $25 to come over and fix my stairs in front of my house, and he came over one day, and then he didn't come back to finish the job, and I'm suing him for get my money back for $25. That type of stuff, nobody's going to jail for that. But you still have to be held accountable for that, and that's like civil court where you sue another citizen. This isn't the government putting you in jail for something. And $20, that's in the Constitution. It has always stayed there, and I'm shocked that nobody's like, oh, let's change that. But it basically says you can have a trial by jury if you want when you sue somebody. Suing's a whole nother thing. Just because you sue them doesn't mean it's actually going to court. If you're like, I want to sue you for $6 million because I don't like the shirt you're wearing, you can legally do that. You're like, what? You can fill out the paper at the courthouse, say, I'm suing this guy for $6 million, and turn in the paper at the courthouse. And then it makes the news. Bob's suing Sally for $10 million for the shirt, whatever. What happens all the time with those is the judge looks at it and it's like, that's dumb, and throws it out, and it's like, we're not actually going forward with that. And they have a criteria that they have to follow in order for it to go through. So a lot of those crazy lawsuits you hear on the news, a lot of times don't actually go to court because the judge is like, that's dumb, that's not going to be a real thing. But $20 is a real thing. If it's over 20, you can have a jury. All right, the 8th Amendment. This one isn't as soft and fluffy as the last one with $20. 8th Amendment says, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Let's talk about the excessive bail. If you see, this guy, some rich dude gets arrested for DUI, hit and run, something like that, and he might be in jail for $1 million bond. Yet, somebody else goes out and beats somebody, puts them in the hospital with a baseball bat, and they get a $5,000 bond. And you're like, how is that fair? Well, here's why. Bail is set based on what you can afford. You're not actually giving money to the court system. I mean, you are, but they're not keeping it. So if this rich dude has $20 million and his bail is $1 million, what that means is he has to let the court hold on to $1 million until he shows back up for his trial. So bail means he can leave jail, but he has to show back up for his trial, which might be in a month or two. All right. And when he shows back up for his trial, as soon as he shows up, they give him his money back. It's just like an IOU. The reason it varies from person to person is that guy that beat somebody with a baseball bat, he might have $0 to his name. All right. Or he might have $5,000 to his name. And they know this in advance. So they set bail based on what the person can afford based on the crime to verify that they will show back up. You can't say, hey, this guy got a parking ticket, $2 million fine, because that's the way you manipulate the system. And the founding fathers knew that early on. If you just really jack up the price of these bails, then you can basically hold people in jail for as long as you want, knowing they can't afford it. So excessive bail shall not be required. It has to be fair based on the crime, and we do a pretty good job of following that today based on how much money people have. The next one is no cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. So there is a minimum standard of living in the United States. All right, this is why prisons are air conditioned. They get 3 meals a day. They get quality, and so prisoners get the quality of food is generally better than school food. And it seems crazy, but the 8th Amendment says if you take people into your care, and they are convicts and they're in a prison and you're taking care of them, you have to treat them like humans, all right? You have to give them a bed to sleep on, you have to keep them clean, you have to give them medical attention, these other things. All the time I hear, oh, they shouldn't treat prisoners so good, it's all, like it's a benefit to be in jail or in prison. You're in prison and life is passing you by outside. Prison is awful. It doesn't matter if you have air conditioning or not. But if the government's going to take you as a person who's been convicted and put you in a prison, it is their responsibility to treat you like a human. That is because in England, they would just put you on a ship and dock you off the coast. And tons of people would get sick and die. Who cares? Not a thing. America, we wanted to be better than that, which is interesting because our prisons get really bad in America in the 1800s. It's not until a woman named Dorothea Dix comes out and realizes how awful our prisons are, and there's like a prison reform largely based off of our Eighth Amendment. We didn't realize how bad they had gotten because nobody had paid attention. Another cruel and unusual thing, I always think it's interesting to pull this up, is this. America has the death penalty. We use it less as we move forward, and a lot of states have said that they won't use it at all. The electric chair. You are electrocuting somebody to death, and you're like, how is that not cruel and unusual punishment? There's a lot of people that would agree with that assumption right now. But here's the advent of this is actually in correlation with the Eighth Amendment. The way execution has happened for a really long time is hanging. So you execute somebody, you hang them. Hanging is not like you see on TV where put a noose on the neck and they drop and then they sit there and they struggle and they suffocate to death. Hanging, when the reason they drop you is it's supposed to snap your neck and be it's supposed to be an instantaneous death. They decided that just seemed really cruel and it was too old, so they want to come up with like a new fancier way to execute people. So they come up with the electric chair, and this comes out in the early 1900s. Because people would accidentally electrocute themselves and kill themselves. So they knew it was a very dangerous thing. They literally thought electrocuting somebody is less cruel than hanging them. We've kind of today realized the electric chair, it's a pretty intense way to go. So they went to lethal injection. And so we still have the death penalty, they go to lethal injection, which basically they inject something in your arm, you silently fall asleep, and you pass away. Well, now there's evidence coming out that actually they're not silently passing away. You're just, the thing they put into them is like a tranquilizer, that they're in agonizing pain as they die, and they just don't look like it. And you can't really ask anybody, how did it go? So with the new research coming out on that, they're like, okay, well maybe lethal injection is too cruel and unusual since it causes pain, agonizing pain, and maybe it's against the Constitution. Now, if you're like, these are murderers and these are the worst people in society, they shouldn't, whatever, you hear this a lot. It doesn't matter what they did. We as a society have to follow the Constitution because that's what we committed ourselves to. The Eighth Amendment says no cruel and unusual punishments. We can't hold ourselves to the same standard the worst people in society, like the people that are getting executed, we can't hold ourselves to their standards. That's why they're getting executed. So it's not a, I just hear it all the time that people wanting to treat criminals and people in prison worse than we currently are. And regardless of my own personal opinions on worse, our Constitution is designed not for that to happen, because that is what happened in a lot of other countries. A lot of starving people to death and all this other stuff is cruel and unusual. So we put an amendment in the Constitution to make sure that doesn't happen. So the question here is, what was the general reason for Amendments 5 through 8? What did the government want to make sure was fair? What do they all have in common? It's courts and the judicial branch and all that. Why was it so important to make sure the courts and things are fair? So pause me, answer that in complete sentences, and we're going to move on. All right, Amendments 9 and 10. These are the ones you can go pop quiz people that know a lot of stuff, and I bet they don't know what these are. The 9th and 10th are really important because they kind of clean up everything. Like after all 1 through 8, okay, and then they're like, all right, I'm sure we forgot something. And they're like, I bet we did too. Let's throw in 2 amendments here that clean up anything that we forgot. So, the 9th Amendment says the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. The Ninth Amendment basically protects the people's rights that are not specifically listed in the Constitution. The Constitution even says, hey, yeah, there's a bunch of things rights that people have. These aren't the only rights people have. All right? So don't think, hey, just because it doesn't say it in the Constitution that you can take these people's rights. It doesn't say you can't steal a man's horse if you're the government, but because it doesn't say that doesn't mean the government can go steal your horse. Let's use common sense. The right to privacy is one that comes up a lot. It doesn't say anything about you having a right to privacy, but isn't that a right of humans? And that's the type of interpretations and stuff that's going to come out after that. But the Ninth Amendment wants to clearly state this is not an end-all, be-all list. All right? Just because it is not mentioned here does not mean it is not a right. So the Ninth Amendment, that's kind of been like, we have more rights than those listed here. And then the 10th Amendment. So the Ninth Amendment has completely deals with individual rights. That at the end of the day, individual rights trump what the government can do. The 10th Amendment says, and there's a bunch of stuff in here about what the federal government can or can't do. There's a lot of stuff that hasn't been mentioned. So the 10th Amendment says the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, or reserved for the states, respectively, or to the people. Here's what that means. All right? The 10th Amendment says federalism. Says we gave the federal government some power, we gave the state government some power. If something comes up and we didn't clearly give jurisdiction to either the federal government or the state governments are in charge. Good example, education. At no point in the Constitution does it mention education. Doesn't at all, anywhere. So when we create public schools, since it's not mentioned, based on the 10th Amendment, who's in charge of education? The states. Because if it doesn't specifically give the federal government the power to do something, the states are in charge. It's all about federalism of sharing because the states are considered to be a smaller government. People have more control over it. People trust the state governments because they're smaller than they do the bigger federal government. So this idea that if we didn't think to give power to one side or the other, it goes to the states. This is, again, it is all designed to give the people as much power and to say so as possible. So the question here is, what's the purpose of the 9th and 10th Amendment? What are they clarifying? The 9th and 10th Amendment, because keep in mind, these are the final, all 10 of these go together, get put on the Constitution before it's voted on. It basically says, whatever we missed, you can't manipulate what we wrote here to give the federal government more power. People are terrified of having a big government. We just created the Constitution. The whole point here is to not have a big government that tells people what they have to do against their will. So the 9th and 10th Amendment just clarifies, at the end of the day, if we forgot to give power to somebody, it goes to the people. If we forgot to give power to one of the governments, it goes to the smaller of the two, to the state governments. It is designed to give the people individual liberty, and it is designed to give the state governments more power because people tend to trust their local state governments more than they do the federal government. All right, that's as far as we're going to get today. We're going to start picking up more amendments as we go on. So the next ones are unique because they happen after the Constitution is in place and people see problems and they go through and have to make changes to the Constitution. So we will pick up on that moving forward. All right, see you guys tomorrow.